Is Sean Longstaff a lot more important than a lot of us thought? Aston Villa fans may be more sorry than what we think for everything that went on all those years ago. And what does the worst performance since Eddie Howe took over mean for the rest of the season? The Newcastle United last word is coming up, so make sure, Newcastle fans, you stick around. Welcome back to Black White Banter, you lovely Newcastle fans. In previous weeks I've said I hope you're having a lovely week. I hope you're having an okay week, because let's face it, the football at the weekend certainly didn't give us any spring in our steps that what previous weeks have, because that was pretty terrible. But to start the video on a very positive note, with perspective, we don't get many of those days, do we? We don't get any days as bad as what Saturday afternoon at Villa Park was. Worst performance that I can remember under Eddie Howe, even going back to when he first took over. I remember us going down to Arsenal when we lost 2-0 in his first away game, and that was probably his worst. That was when Eddie Howe hadn't even put his print on the team, and Saturday was probably his worst. But having said that, Aston Villa were very good. We were pretty much beaten in all areas of the pitch: defence, midfield, attack, possession, passing, attacking intent. We were just beaten by the much better team. And I say that through gritted teeth, as I always will, but it's true. We were. And what follows the match vlogs, by the way, if you haven't checked out my match vlog from Saturday, it's just a little bit further down. Of course, the match vlogs, Newcastle fans, if you're a recent subscriber, and I've had a lot lately, I do drink on the away days, and you've probably seen that. You can probably tell by how croaky my voice is, by how messed up my eyes look towards the end, and how just generally I look a little bit worse for wear. I don't always get boozy as hell, but I thought Aston Villa might be my last one for a while. So if my opinions at the end of the video, in the right aftermath of the match, aren't absolutely bang on, I apologise. But it's very difficult to gauge everything that's just gone in 90 minutes, 30 seconds after the game. That's why it's an instant reaction to give you an authentic feel for away games and what it's like to smash numerous pints from 6 o'clock in the morning. That's why I always try and do as many of these last word videos as possible, because it gives me time to reflect. But I'll tell you one thing before we get into the nitty gritty. How to get lots of Aston Villa fans dropping in your DMs and your comments is just say that Ollie Watkins isn't the greatest of strikers. My God, did I get a lot of comments for that one little remark. And I stand by it. Yes, Ollie Watkins tore us a new one on Saturday, scored a couple, set up one, could have had a couple more, but we were really bad. And if I stand corrected in a couple of years' time and Ollie Watkins is one of the best strikers in Europe, then so be it. I'll happily say when I'm wrong just as much as when I'm right, but I still don't think he's that great. He's just going through a purple patch. But my God, did it get Aston Villa fans riled up in the match preview and in the match vlog. So make sure you look at some of the comments as well. It was like reeling fishing. That wasn't even my intention to put the fishing rod out. So yeah, as I said, not the greatest of performances. But again, before we get into the real stuff about what went on Saturday, if you're a new subscriber, if you're not a new subscriber, drop down and give us a little like, because it makes doing these videos just that little bit more worth it, because it goes to more people. And whack that subscribe button if you like my opinion by the end of this video. There'll be more match vlogs to come, starting in Tottenham, against Tottenham on Sunday at St James's Park, so stick around for those. So yeah, I've certainly had time to reflect on that awful afternoon down there. We'd won 5 games previous, so 15 points from 18, as I said on my match vlog. With perspective, is not a bad thing at all, but I think it was the manner of the defeat that shocked us all. We'd had a full week to prepare for that one after Brentford, and I don't think any of us expected to not lay a glove on Aston Villa in the way that we did. Now, the first big talking point before the match was Sean Longstaff not playing. I called for it, because I looked at who'd been playing well. You had Joe Willock, who hasn't done much wrong lately. Joe Linton played so well against Brentford and West Ham. Bruno pretty much picks himself for creativity in midfield, and it became a case of, right, so if you're going to go with, say, Murphy and Gordon on each wing, and you're not going to play Willock in that forward position, either side of Isak or Wilson, which central midfielder comes out? And obviously against Brentford, Sean Longstaff had come out, and it had worked quite well, because we'd recovered from 1-0 down and won the game. Hence why I said we should maybe try that. I think it became apparent against Aston Villa why Sean Longstaff is important to our midfield. And what was interesting for me, sorry about the voice by the way, I'm suffering a little bit of illness, so that's why I'm a little bit croaky. I wasn't on the beers last night on a midweek, I promise you, on a school night. Yeah, what interested me about the aftermath of the match was Eddie Howe actually admitted that Sean Longstaff had a batch of tonsillitis. So it wasn't necessarily a tactical decision from Eddie Howe to bring him out. And Eddie Howe went on to say that our midfield didn't look right without him. So you can make of that what you want, because a lot of Newcastle fans, myself included, will have thought that Eddie Howe was trying to change things based off that Brentford game, because Longstaff came out and it looked like it worked in the second half. Maybe that's not the case. And we just didn't look at the races without a little bit of work. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Sean Longstaff not playing was the reason that we didn't win that game. I'll touch on other reasons in a second. We weren't at the races from the goalkeeper. Well, not the goalkeeper. It's a bit harsh on Nick Pope. Could have maybe done better with the third one. From the defence all the way to the front line, we weren't at the races. We really, really weren't. All the good things that we know about Newcastle this season and under Eddie Howe, we weren't doing them properly. But for me, without Sean Longstaff in there, Bruno's role changed in the team. And against a team like Aston Villa, if you break it down, and I've watched the game back since, if you break the match down, Bruno's press wasn't there. There was a gap between the lines midfield. Yes, our players a little bit further on, your Joe Lintons, your Murphys, your Gordons, they were still pressing quite high, but Bruno left a little bit of space between him and his central midfielder he was up against, and they picked that off quite a lot. And I think the midfield changed because, yes, as I mentioned in the pre-match for the Aston Villa game, Joe Linton brings that energy, he brings that aggression that maybe Longstaff is strongest at in midfield, breaking things up, but he's still not the same player. Sean Longstaff won't link up with the forward players as much as what your Joe Linton will, but Longstaff does so much running and the statistics show it, and I think that's an area of the field, looking at how Saturday went as well, that we need to be looking at in this summer transfer window, is a player like Sean Longstaff. Because Bruno, as much as he is high energy and as much as he loves to be on the ball at every given opportunity, is not going to put the miles in that someone like Longstaff does. And I would love to see the comparison of stats between those two players with regards to their numbers of how many kilometres ran this season, because I think it will be way off between the two. We missed him, and you can say what you want about Sean, about his quality in the final third, his final pass, his shot at times can be a bit wayward, but what he does in the centre of the park has become very important to everything we've done this season, and I've got no doubts about it. If he's fit for Tottenham, he will be back in the team, and it was interesting to see us without it. Maybe it was coincidence that on the day he didn't play, we were really, really bad across the park. That hasn't helped this conversation of him needing to come back in. But we lacked him. We really, really did. And I'd be even interested to get what Bruno's and Joe Linton's opinions were on playing without Longstaff. And we just look really lacklustre in that midfield. I'm not going to single out too many players from Saturday's game, but for me, a player defensively who needs to improve is Kieran Trippier. And that might surprise a few people. I've said it now on a couple of these videos. Kieran Trippier, since the turn of the year, he's put in a couple of good performances up from a defensive point of view. But generally speaking, I just don't think he's been at it since the World Cup. And I said that about Callum Wilson until more recently when he's banged in a few. I don't know. He's not looking positioning-wise, tackling-wise, decision-making-wise, most importantly. Against Aston Villa, I thought across the game his decision-making was very, very poor. I think it's a player, going forward, you know what you're getting with him. He's always going to link up with his right midfielder. He's always going to take set pieces, and he's always going to affect the game in the final third in some way. Like at West Ham, for example, I thought Trippier going forward was great. He was the vocal point of most good things that we did in the final third. But defensively, when we are being tested, I just don't think he's been at the races for a while now. So that's an area that I'm a little bit concerned about going into this final third of the season. And on the other side, Mr. Dan Burn. Now, this is a conversation I've had repeatedly. Dan Burn, I wanted him out. If you'd gone back a month ago, around the time of the Carabao Cup final, I was a little bit at the end of me telling with these performances, and I say that in the nicest way possible, because of course Dan Burn is the boy from Blythe, but it gets to a point for me, do I wonder whether Dan Burn's criticism is reduced massively from Newcastle fans because he's the boy from Blythe? I'm going to be honest with that one. The answer's got to be yes, because I think if Dan Burn is a random left back putting in some of the performances he has in the last 3 months, and I'm not saying every performance, I'm not. He did pick back up after the Carabao Cup final a little bit, but I remember against West Ham at home, Bournemouth away, he didn't have a very good game. The Carabao Cup final, I didn't think he had a very good game, and again on Saturday, even some of our away matches, I didn't think he started the West Ham away game very well, but obviously we grew into that quite quickly. I think if it was a new signing from Spain or Italy or Germany, and he was putting in them performances, there'd be a quicker call for Matt Targett to come back in. And I think Dan Burn, maybe he needs a break to give him a shock to the system. Maybe he needs a break to refresh his batteries. You know what you're getting in terms of going forward with Dan Burn, that he's not the most agile because he's bloody 8'6". He's a giant. So you're not going to get that pacey player bombing forward like many do in the modern game. But I think from a defensive point of view now, at times he's been looking slow to the first tackle. His use of the ball has been pretty bad. I thought it was really poor against Aston Villa on Saturday. Whereas Matt Targett, I'm not saying Matt Targett is a world beater, but when Matt Targett played before Dan Burn came into the football club, he didn't really put a foot wrong for us. And he's a much more natural left back. Of course he is. He likes to get forward a little bit quicker than what Dan Burn does. Of course he does, because he's more agile than what Dan Burn is. And I think Eddie Howe's got some decisions there to make. And I know Eddie Howe's actually recently talked in a press conference how he doesn't like to change a back four. And I totally get that. Back four is your foundation. Keep that solid. Keep that unity. They understand each other more. They play with each other. I totally get that. Like Botman will know where Dan Burn is, and so on and so on and so on. But that being said, you can't always keep the same back four just on that principle if one of them isn't performing that well. And you've got another player who can come in who could maybe perform a little bit better. So I certainly think Eddie Howe, based off Saturday, based off recent performances, has got something to think about in the left-back position. I know I mentioned Kieran Trippier. That's not one where anything's going to change. I just hope Kieran Trippier improves as the weeks go on in some of these really tough fixtures we've got in this run into the Champions League, because I just feel like we're being found out a little bit down that side with some of his decision making. But Dan Burn is a one where Eddie Howe's got that option. On a side note, obviously a lot has been made about our rivalry with Aston Villa. The amount of comments I've had from my match vlog and my match preview about Aston Villa fans who actually really respect Newcastle fans, who actually were a bit embarrassed by that flag, that banner in 2009 when we got relegated, is quite interesting. So that's changed my opinions on Aston Villa. That's another thing that's come out of Saturday. Maybe that was a small minority. Maybe we need to squash that rivalry a little bit. I know there's the Twitter users, which a lot of Aston Villa fans have said aren't associated to us. Those are the idiots. Twitter seems to be an absolute shit show for Aston Villa, trying to create this rivalry with us. But maybe a lot of them are embarrassed. I know a fan actually did a written apology before the game about what happened all them years ago. So I've never hated Aston Villa in the same way I do Man United and Sunderland and whatnot. But there's always been that bitterness there because we don't like their fan base. A lot of fans have jumped on the comments from my match vlog and said there's no rivalry from them. They think we are two great clubs, foundation of English football. So that's an interesting one. Just for one for Newcastle fans to think about. Changed my perspective a little bit because I thought, yeah, maybe whoever created that Sob on the Time banner years ago was an absolute nugget. A 4-game-a-season sort of man who just wanted to get a reaction. And that was when social media was barely even a thing. And all these years on, that idiot can't believe how lucky he was to get his flag shared year upon year when we play them. I don't know, that's just a side note on that one. Moving forward, looking at our run-in, that game against Spurs on Sunday is huge. Now, yes, we were bad against Aston Villa. Yes, that's one of our worst performances, but we haven't had many. And I think Eddie Howe, knowing how bad we were, knowing how his body language was in his press conferences, seeing how frustrated and angry he looked because he knew that was just so out of character, I wouldn't be surprised if we go and absolutely smash Spurs and go on a bit of a run now. Of course, that's wishful thinking because every one of us would love that to happen, to get the Champions League spots. But Eddie Howe is a manager obsessed with his job. obsessed with every small detail. And him and Mr. Mad Dog Tyndall will have come away from that game on Saturday furious. Eddie Howe's missus hasn't got a word in edgeways, because all he's talked about is that he's either eaten his tea and gone straight to bed, or he's been in his private office upstairs in his huge house working away trying to think what he can do next for the Tottenham game. You can guarantee that man is obsessed. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a catalyst now to see us go on and absolutely smash teams. Again, wishful thinking, of course, but Tottenham on Sunday is huge. We can beat that Tottenham team. That Tottenham team is it's 6s and 7s, 3s and 2s, whatever you want to call it. They don't look great. They don't look great defensively. They look fragile. They don't have a proper manager in place. Their saving grace is Harry Kane. We try and keep him quiet. Son hasn't had the best of seasons, but if we can go and smash Tottenham and make a statement there, we've got Everton the following game. Huge game, that Everton match, because again, those are the kind of games, if you're going to get Champions League, a really struggling Everton side away, that you need to get points from. And I'd love that game on Saturday to take a negative into a positive, to be a real catalyst to push us on to get that Champions League spot. And hey, I've said it from the start of the season, I'll say it again, if we didn't get Champions League and we got Europa League, I'm absolutely happy as Larry, happy as a pig in shit. But because we've occupied them Champions League places now for so long, so long, so close to Man United, we could go and level with them on points again this week, depending on how the results go. It would just be so disappointing, wouldn't it? And I think Luke Edwards has done an article on the Telegraph about how there's a squad playlist. There's a playlist that Eddie Howe has and Dan Ashworth has of who we're going to go for this summer. There's some huge names on there. I wonder how many of them players will be signed depending on whether we get Champions League football. The money and the revenue that comes in, the attraction of Newcastle, everything. And I think Champions League to Europa League, yes, Europa League still brings a lot of money with it, and there's a Champions League place there if you win, and you're on telly every week, and you're going all over Europe. But Champions League is the daddy. It's the whopper. It's the Christmas day of the year of football, of the prize, of the money involved, and that's what's going to keep us spending with these rich owners. So Sunday is huge, but let's use, and I'm sure Eddie Howe will be, Saturday to be the catalyst of the rest of the season. Let's forget about that. Let's bury it. That was terrible. We were due a really, really bad performance, because I said we'd been bad away from home for 1, 2, 3, 4 matches, but we were still managing to pick up results. And Aston Villa, just in the form they're in, I said it was 2 informed teams, absolutely destroyed us. So not the best 3 or 4 days in the aftermath of that match. Not much content from me got on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, because there hasn't really been much to make a joke of, to be totally honest with you. But that's not me saying don't get us on there. So get us across all social media at Black and White Banter. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, Newcastle fans. What did you take away from Saturday's game? Is it just a minor bumper in the road, or is there more things there to be worried about? And if so, what things are you concerned about from that performance? I'm going to go crack open a beer. I've had a long day. I'll see you on the next video, which will probably be a Tottenham Hotspur match preview. Huge, huge game. And of course, there's a match vlog coming for that. So if you've liked this one and you want to see more match vlogs, whack that subscribe button and be an absolute legend in the process. I'll see you on the next one, Newcastle fans, and try and enjoy your week. Forget about Saturday. How are the lads?